I lent my best friend $40,000 and lost everything except the truth. There is a version of this story where I'm the naive one, the soft one, the person who should have known better. I've heard that version. I've told it to myself at 3 in the morning more times than I can count. And I want you to know, I no longer believe it. My name is Eric. I'm 34 years old, and for 11 years, the most important non-romantic relationship in my life was with a man named Cole. We met in college, same dorm, same floor, thrown together by the randomness of room assignments the way so many lasting friendships begin. Cole was everything I wasn't. Loud where I was quiet. Instinctively social where I had to work at it. He had a way of walking into a room that made the room reorganize itself around him. I found it magnetic. Most people did. We graduated, we both ended up in Denver. I went into financial planning. Steady, analytical, not glamorous. Cole bounced between ventures. A bar that didn't work, a consulting project that went nowhere, a real estate thing that was always 6 months from taking off. He had the ideas and the energy. What he lacked, consistently, persistently, was follow-through. I watched this pattern for years. I watched women fall for him and then quietly fall away. I watched employers be dazzled and then frustrated. I watched him charm his way into opportunities and charm his way out of the accountability that came with them. And I kept being his friend. Because underneath all of it, or so I believed, was someone genuine, someone who was just still figuring it out, who would land eventually. In 22-1, Cole came to me with a business plan, a coffee roasting company. Small batch, direct trade, focused on a market he'd researched carefully. Specialty coffee subscriptions for corporate offices. He had the supplier contacts. He had a potential client list. He had a space lined up in a converted warehouse on the east side of the city. He needed $40,000 to get off the ground, equipment first and last on the space, initial inventory, website branding. He asked me, I want to be honest about my internal process here. I knew the pattern. I had watched it for a decade. The rational part of my brain, the part that spent 8 hours a day helping other people think clearly about money, was raising its hand. But Cole sat across from me, and he was different this time. Quieter than usual, more careful. He had a binder, a physical binder with financial projections and supplier agreements and a 12-month cash flow model. He'd done the work. Or it looked like he'd done the work. I know I haven't always followed through, he said. I know you've watched me drop things. This is different. I need you to trust me one more time. I gave him the $40,000. We signed a loan agreement. Real, notarized with a repayment schedule. I felt good about it. I felt like this was the moment I'd been waiting for. The version of Cole that finally made good on his potential. The first 3 months, things seemed to move. He sent me photos of the space being set up, equipment arriving, his first roast, a few small client wins. He was excited in a way I hadn't seen from him before. Genuinely excited. I let myself feel relieved. Month 4, the updates slowed. Month 5, a missed repayment. Cash flow timing, he said. I'll catch up next month. I drove by the warehouse space one afternoon, without telling him. The lights were off, the sign was gone. There was a notice on the door from the building management. I called Cole, he answered, and for the first time in 11 years of friendship, I could hear it in his voice. The slight flatness, the readiness of someone who has already rehearsed the explanation. The corporate market dried up faster than I expected, he said. I had to close the space. I'm working on pivoting. I was going to call you. Were you? I said. Eric. I drove by today, I said. The notice on the door is dated 6 weeks ago. Silence. 6 weeks. He had known for 6 weeks that the business was gone and had continued sending me progress photos. Stock images? I later found out. Not even his own operation? I went home and I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, doing the thing I did for clients every day, running numbers, accepting what the numbers said. $40,000, 6 months of deliberate misrepresentation, 11 years of what I had believed was friendship. I called a lawyer the next morning. Here is what I learned. I had a signed loan agreement. I had the photos he'd sent, which were provably not his operation. I had the text messages where he'd described business progress that didn't exist. This crossed from a failed business into something closer to fraud. My lawyer was careful. She said, "You can pursue this civilly. A judgment will go on his record. Collecting is another matter. He doesn't appear to have significant assets." I said, "I understand. Proceed anyway. I wasn't doing it for the money. I knew I probably wouldn't see most of it. I was doing it because Cole had spent 11 years operating in a world where charm erased consequences, where being good company meant the ledger never fully came due. I was not going to be one more person who let him walk away from it. The civil suit was filed in March. Cole called me when he received the paperwork. He was angry, which I had expected, accused me of destroying the friendship over money, said I was being vindictive, said he was going through a hard time and I was making it worse. I let him finish. Then I said, Cole, you sent me photos of someone else's business for 6 weeks while I was waiting to hear how my money was being used. You didn't call me when it closed. You were going to let it just go quiet. Hope I wouldn't notice. That's not a hard time. That's a choice. He didn't have an answer for that. The judgment came through 4 months later in my favor. Full amount plus legal fees. Cole didn't contest it. I've collected about $8,000 of it so far through wage garnishment. Slowly. The rest, I'm not sure I'll ever see. But here's what I have. A legal document that says in plain language that what he did was not a misfortune. It was a wrong. Cole has mutual friends who know what happened. A few of them, the ones who always thought he'd eventually come good, went quiet after the judgment. Not in a satisfying way. Just quietly. The way people go quiet when something they believed in doesn't hold up. I think about the binder sometimes, the cash flow projections, the careful, rehearsed quietness of him that afternoon. I think about how much work it must have taken to perform sincerity that convincingly. And I think, what if he'd put that energy into actually building something? That's the part that makes me sad. Not the money, not even the friendship, the waste of it. The extraordinary, pointless waste.
The secret my mother kept for 30 years changed everything for everyone. I am going to tell you a story about my family, and I want you to understand, before I begin, that everyone in this story believed they were doing the right thing. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. The most destructive things are rarely done by people who think they are being destructive. My name is Callie. I'm 31. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. My mother, my brother Ryan, and me. My father died when I was 4. A car accident. I have almost no memory of him. Only photographs. And the way my mother's voice changed slightly whenever someone mentioned his name. My mother raised us alone. She worked as a bookkeeper for a local accounting firm. She is, a quiet, contained woman. Not cold, but careful. The kind of person who keeps things in order because disorder frightens her, who says I'm fine when she isn't, not to be deceptive, but because she genuinely believes that managing her feelings alone is less burden on the world. Ryan and I grew up close, as siblings do when there are only 2 of you and 1 parent. He's 2 years older. We fought like siblings fight, constantly, passionately, about nothing, and we protected each other the way siblings protect each other, automatically, without thinking. When I was 28, my mother got sick, not fatally, as it turned out, a cardiac episode, serious enough to require surgery. Serious enough that for 48 hours, we genuinely did not know which direction it would go. Ryan and I drove back to Ohio from our respective cities, me from Chicago, him from Nashville. We sat in a waiting room together for the better part of 2 days, drinking bad coffee, not talking much. The way you get when you're afraid and there's nothing to do with the fear. Our mother came through the surgery fine. She was in recovery when they let us see her. She looked small in the hospital bed, which she never looked anywhere else. She was always, in my memory, a person who took up exactly the right amount of space. In that bed, she looked like she'd been reduced. She held both of our hands, and then she said, I need to tell you something. In case, I need you to know. Before I can tell myself it can wait. Ryan and I looked at each other. Ryan, she said, your father was not the man in the photographs. Silence. The cardiac monitor beeped. A nurse walked past outside. I became suddenly, vividly aware of the texture of the plastic chair under me. What? Ryan said. She told us. Slowly. In the measured, careful way she did everything. Like someone who has been rehearsing this for 30 years and is now, finally, saying the words out loud. She and our father, the man in the photographs, had been struggling. Their marriage in its last year had been unhappy in the specific grinding way that some marriages get. Not hateful, just worn through. She had had a brief, single, terrible decision of a thing with a man she'd known through work. His name was Thomas. It had lasted 3 weeks. She had ended it. She had never told our father. And then she had discovered she was pregnant. The timing made it ambiguous. She had never, in 30 years, resolved the ambiguity. She had chosen not to know, because knowing would have required action. And she was not sure, in that marriage, in that year, with a 4-year-old daughter already depending on her, that she had the capacity for the action it would require. Our father had died 14 months after Ryan was born, the accident. And with him gone, the question had seemed to her like something that could simply not exist, something she could fold into the life they'd had and bury under time. "I'm telling you now," she said, "because if something happens to me, you deserve to know the truth. Ryan, you may have a father who is still alive. I don't know. I've never known. And I should have found out. I should have told you a long time ago. I'm sorry." Ryan didn't speak, not for a very long time. He stood up, walked to the window, looked at the parking lot, and I watched my brother stand there with his hands very still at his sides, and I thought, I have no idea what's happening inside him right now, and I don't know if I ever will. He turned back. "Is he still alive?" he asked. "Thomas, do you know?" "I don't know," she said. "I lost track. It was a long time ago." "Okay," Ryan said, and sat back down, and held her hand again. I watched this, and I could not find the bottom of it. Our mother recovered fully. She came home 3 weeks later. Life reorganized itself back into something resembling normal. But something had shifted, not broken. Shifted, like a piece of furniture moved 2 inches. Everything still works. You just keep almost catching your hip on the corner. Ryan and I talked about it, once, seriously, about 2 months later. He had looked into Thomas. Quietly, on his own. Thomas was alive. He was 64. He lived in Columbus. He had a wife, 2 adult children, a life that had gone on entirely unaware. Ryan had not contacted him. "Are you going to?" I asked. He thought about it for a long time. "I don't know yet," he said. "I know who I am. I know what my life is. I know who Dad was to me. Photographs and stories, and the shape he left in the family. What does it change to know the biology? It might change how you understand yourself," I said. "Or it might just complicate a man's life who has no idea I exist, and complicate my mother's recovery, and complicate everything. For what? For a medical history?" I didn't have an answer. Ryan still hasn't contacted Thomas. That was 3 years ago. He says he reserves the right to change his mind. My mother has never brought it up again. I think she feels, not forgiven exactly, but set down. Like she finally put something heavy on the floor after carrying it for 30 years. And whether we forgive her or not, the weight is distributed differently now. Some of it is ours. I've thought about what it would mean to call it a betrayal. My mother, betraying my brother by not telling him, betraying the man who raised him, betraying the whole family's understanding of itself. But I keep coming back to this. She was 26 years old, she had a small daughter and a struggling marriage, and she made a mistake, and then she made another mistake trying to contain the first one. And then circumstances, the accident, the grief, the years, made the second mistake increasingly impossible to undo. I'm not saying she was right. She wasn't right. I'm saying I understand how a person gets there, step by step, each one reasonable in the moment, until you look up and realize you're somewhere you never intended to be, and too much time has passed to go back the same way you came. Ryan is the same person he was before that hospital room, mostly. But sometimes I catch him looking at old photographs of our father in a slightly different way, not searching exactly, just looking more carefully, the way you look at something you thought you understood completely and are now seeing for the first time.
My ex tried to ruin my career. She handed me my future instead. I want to start by saying, I was not a perfect boyfriend. I'm going to tell you a story about someone doing something genuinely terrible, and I want to be clear up front that I'm not the hero of my own past. I was distracted. I was ambitious. I prioritized work over the relationship more times than I should have. The relationship ending was not unjust. What came after the ending? That was something else entirely. Her name was Serena. We dated for 2.5 years. She was, and is, a lifestyle influencer. At the time we were together, she had about 80,000 Instagram followers. By the time this story ends, she had significantly more. So did I in a different way. I'm a chef, not a celebrity chef, not a TV chef, just a working chef who had spent 10 years building a reputation in Seattle's restaurant scene. At the time of our breakup, I was the executive chef at a well-reviewed restaurant called Meridian. I had been there 4 years. I'd taken it from a mid-tier bistro to something people actually talked about. We had a Michelin guide mention. We were 18 months into planning a second location. I was, professionally, exactly where I'd worked to be. Serena and I ended badly. Not violently, but badly. The last few months had been a slow, mutual erosion. Fights about time, about priorities, about the fact that I consistently chose the restaurant over her, and had convinced myself this was necessary rather than a choice. The final conversation was on a Sunday in September. She said she was done. I said I understood. We were both tired. There was no yelling. She took her things over the following week, and I went back to the restaurant and buried myself in the second location plans. 2 months later, I started hearing things. A colleague mentioned that someone had been posting about me online. Not by name, not initially, but in ways that were clearly identifiable to anyone who knew the scene. Stories about a chef in Seattle, an ex, a toxic relationship, controlling behavior. I found the posts. Serena had been posting, for 2 months, steadily, with increasing detail, a version of our relationship that I did not recognize. Stories of emotional manipulation, of isolation, of behavior that, in the framing she was using, would be characterized as abuse. None of it was true. Not the specific incidents she described, not the pattern she was constructing. I want to be careful here. I've thought about this a lot. I was not a good partner in the final year of that relationship. I was absent. I was sometimes short-tempered after long services. I didn't give her what she needed. But there is a meaningful difference between being a bad partner and being what she was describing. And the things she was specifically describing did not happen. The posts were going viral in a specific way. Not mainstream viral. The industry is smaller than people think. The posts were being shared by food bloggers, by hospitality accounts, by people who knew Meridian. Within 3 weeks of finding them, I got a call from the restaurant owner, Paul. He was uncomfortable, apologetic. He said the posts were creating a problem, that he'd had 2 potential investors in the second location call him with questions, that the Meridian team was distracted, that he thought, for now, it would be better if I stepped back while things settled. Stepped back, I said. Temporarily, he said. I had built that restaurant, 4 years. The menu, the kitchen culture, the relationships with suppliers, all of it. And I was being asked to step back because my ex-girlfriend was posting things on Instagram. I went home. I called a friend, another chef named Marcus, who I trusted completely. I told him everything. He listened. Then he said, "Do you have proof that what she's saying isn't true?" I thought about it. I have 2.5 years of text messages, I said slowly. I have emails. I have the actual record of the relationship, which tells a completely different story than what she's posting. Then you know what to do, Marcus said. I spent the next week doing something I had never done in 10 years of professional cooking. I stopped working, and I started writing. Not a rebuttal, not a point-by-point denial. I wrote my story, my actual story. How I got into cooking at 17 in my grandmother's kitchen. The years of prep work and station work, and the slow climb. The early years at Meridian, what the restaurant was when I arrived, and what we built together. The relationship with Serena, honestly, including the ways I had failed. And then the posts, and what they said, and what the actual text record showed. I posted it on a Sunday night, a long essay, with screenshots. Not attacking her, just presenting the actual record, and asking people to read both. By Monday morning, it had 8,000 shares. The food community, it turns out, had been waiting for a response, not because they had already decided I was guilty, but because the original posts had felt, to many of them, slightly off, too constructed, too perfectly framed. And when the actual record appeared, the contrast was stark. The investors Paul had worried about called him back, said they'd read the essay, said they were still in. 3 food journalists who had seen the original posts wrote about the situation. None of them were kind to Serena. One piece from a respected food writer in Seattle was specifically damning. She compared the original posts to a pattern she'd seen before and named it clearly. I didn't orchestrate any of that. I just told the truth, with evidence, and let people decide. Paul called me back within 2 weeks, asked me to return, apologized for asking me to step back, said he should have waited for my side. I returned. The second location opened 14 months later. Serena's follower count, which had briefly spiked during the original posts, declined significantly over the following months. Several brand partnerships didn't renew. I don't track her closely enough to know where things stand now. Here's what I know. She gave me something, accidentally, that I never would have done on my own. I had spent 10 years building my reputation entirely inside kitchens, in closed rooms, invisible to anyone outside the industry. The essay I wrote in response to her posts was read by 40,000 people. It led to a column I now write monthly for a food publication. It led to a speaking invitation at a hospitality conference. It led, eventually, to a book proposal about kitchen culture, about the gap between what food looks like from outside and what it actually is. She tried to end my career. She accidentally started the second half of it. I don't feel gratitude toward her. I want to be honest about that. What she did was wrong, and it caused real damage. To me, to people at the restaurant who were destabilized, to anyone watching who took her account at face value. But I've stopped being angry, because the best thing I can do, the only thing worth doing, is be so good, so thoroughly documented, so plainly real, that there's no room left for the version of me she invented.